Hi, this is Rhett with testingtheory.com, and today we're going to talk about how not all data is created equal. We'll also review the 3 different factors that you should understand when you're trying to evaluate different types of data. When you're in an organization that's trying to make important decisions, there's lots of people bringing lots of data from different sources. And if you don't understand that there's different types of data, different valuable data sets, then you're likely to make decisions that aren't as good. There are 3 main factors that we're going to review. First, correlation versus causation. Second, what we think versus what our actual visitors think. And third, the amount of bias that is inherent in the data. We'll also put these different types of data on a simple graph so you can see relative to each other the amount of value that they bring and the inherent bias that may be in them. Okay, I want to show you a simple graph that will help us understand the data. On the x-axis, you have closer to causation, where at 0, there's no causation, and higher up, you get more causation. On the y-axis, you have closer to the visitor. So at 0, you have our own thoughts, opinions, and ideas, and then as you get higher up on that scale, you get to the actual visitor's opinions, thoughts, and ideas. The closer you get to the end user, the better the data. The closer you get to causation, the better the data. The first type of data that I want to talk about is UX and heuristics. There are a lot of good principles and best practices in UX design. The challenge is that's just our own ideas. It's what the industry tells us, or it's what professionals tell us. If you're doing a heuristic analysis, it's what you think. So the challenge with a UX or heuristics approach is it's not close to the visitor. It's very centered on what we think. It's also, there's no causation there. It's just correlation. So any ideas or principles that are being used are not relative to the visitor, and they're also not relative to causation. There's no change and there's no influence. From a bias perspective, a UX designer may or may not have bias in what they're building. And so doing a heuristic analysis is very dependent on the person doing it. It could have a lot of bias or it could have no bias. And so it's kind of middle range in terms of bias. The next form of data that I want to talk about is the user research or usability data. Now, the nice thing about usability data is you're getting closer to the visitor. You have visitors who you're talking to, you're asking them questions. In a usability study, you might be watching them do something. The challenge with this, though, is there's just a small sample size. So yeah, while you're close to the visitors, you're close to so few of them that it's really hard to get good data. You have a little more causation because you can put something in front of the visitor and see how they react. So there's a little bit of causation, you're getting closer to it. But the biggest challenge with usability studies is the bias that is created by being in the study. You've got people asking questions, you've got people in an unnatural environment, and so all these things combine to create a more biased experience, and so the data itself is less quality or less trustworthy or not as good because you've got a small sample size, it's not quite causation yet, and there's inherently more bias when you're asking people outside of their normal environment. The next type of data is your analytics and heat map data. The nice thing about this type of data is it's very close to the visitors. The reason why is because it's their actual data, it's their behavior, it's you watching them, it's you seeing what they did with the site. It's not biased at all. Unless you have a problem with your implementation that's tracking incorrectly, there's no bias in the data. It just is. The data that's collected from your visitors with analytics and heat maps is great data, but the challenge with it, it's not causal data, it's correlative data. So while it's very close to the visitors because it's their actual behavior, it's on the opposite end of the x-axis, on the 0 end, because your visitors aren't giving you causal data. There's no change. It's just tracking what they do, and it's not comparing that behavior to anything else. Any analysis you do with correlative analytics data doesn't have that causal element and isn't as good of data as you can use. The next type of data that I want to talk about is customer feedback data. The nice thing about customer feedback data is it's high as you can get on the y-axis because it's your actual customers. They're actually telling you what they think, what they feel, what they like, what they don't. But the problem is you get a very small sample size typically with customer feedback data. You can't get feedback from all your visitors, and you also get some very strong opinions with visitors. And so your likelihood of getting bias from your customer feedback is higher because you get what's called the vocal minority. You get some people who really love something or really hate something, and they want to tell you about it. That vocal minority creates more bias in decision making if that's the only data that you're relying upon. So again, the great thing about your customer feedback data is it's so close to the visitor that it should definitely be looked at, but it's so far away from causation, and it's so far away, and it's more likely to have bias because it's just a few people giving what they think is important feedback. The last type of data that I want to talk about is my favorite kind of data, as you might have guessed. It's the A/B testing, multivariate testing data that you get when you run tests on your site. The nice thing about your testing data is it's causal data. You made a change and you influenced something, and that change in behavior is the causation that you can act on. The other nice thing about your testing data is it's your actual visitors who are in the tests, and their behavior, which is them doing it, is what helps you interpret the results. So it's very close to the visitor because it's them. It's causal because there's a test and there's change that you're comparing. And assuming that you're not setting up your testing correctly or putting bias into the test by doing it just wrong, your testing data, your A/B tests, your multivariate tests, they give you a lot of really good unbiased data. So there's less bias, there's causation, there's close to the visitor, and that's why, in my opinion, A/B testing data is one of the best types of data that you can use. Your split tests give you so much valuable information about your visitors, and when you strategically design them, you can learn so much about what the site needs to help your visitors convert better. If you want to truly have better tests and increase your conversions and make better decisions with your business, you should use your A/B testing, multivariate testing data. So thanks for joining me as we walk through the different types of data. I hope you see that causation is important, that getting close to your visitors is important, and limiting the bias in the data you're using is important. As you use the best types of data to make your decisions, you will make better decisions. You will increase the revenue for your visitors, for your company, and you'll be able to grow the business. If you found this video helpful, please hit that thumbs up, give me that like, and you can also visit me at testingtheory.com if you're interested in getting a free consulting session. Come to my website and sign up, and we can talk about your business, what you need, and the challenges you're facing in your own testing program.